Hello, I'm Alex Mozed. You're here on Winner Take All, where we talk about the constant battle between large tech monopolies and traditional incumbents. I'm joined by Nick Johnson, co-author with me on the book, Modern Monopolies. We've got a packed agenda, a big couple weeks, this week, last week, and next week, with earnings, which we're going to get to in a little bit. But first, if anyone's been traveling to LAX recently, it's in the Los Angeles airport, I feel bad for you. I've been there in the past few months. Every time I've been there, it has been what they're deeming here Carmageddon. The traffic was so bad to get an Uber. It took 30 or 40 minutes just for the Uber to get to my terminal. And then once the Uber gets to the terminal, I never actually ended up waiting. Then you'd have to wait probably another 30 minutes just to get out
of all the traffic
of the airport because of all the traffic. And so what was the LAX's response? Well, we're just going to ban all Uber and Lyfts from being able to do, pick up at the curb.
Wow.
At LAX. And then you get in a shuttle and you're supposed to go elsewhere. But so obviously this was a boon to the taxis because the way that
airport's a big lucrative area for them.
Well, it's a big lucrative area. And so what LAX did is they told Uber and Lyft in the app, you can't allow pickups. Right. So it's very easy to enforce.
We'll fine you and we'll impound your drivers and all this stuff.
Well, yeah, you don't need to enforce it because you just tell the company, ban this area, which they've done historically.
Right.
So they know they have the capability to do that. So you turn it off in the app. Now you can't do it. Taxis, you don't have that, right? So taxis are, I drop someone off, boom, I'll just pick someone up and I'm out of here, right? And so they can't police it for the taxis.
Well, taxis also have an official presence at the airport. Most airports, like LAX has a taxi stand. And I'm sure
that's
there's some
true. I
economics
don't know if they
involved in
banned
that.
all pickup or not, but net, it was pretty clear that taxis were going to be the winner.
LaGuardia and JFK did this in the past. You used to have to take a shuttle to get into Uber and
LaGuardia
Lyft.
still has it, yeah.
Well, LaGuardia has, a lot of them have separate areas now, which they converted a parking lot or something into an Uber pickup area. But it used to be you had to take like a 10-minute shuttle to get to a totally different area.
I think some of them it still is. Maybe I forget. I don't know.
Might be some terminals.
Yeah, but yes.
But yeah, it's not an uncommon challenge, and the taxi companies are in tight with the airports. So
yes, they are. So conveniently, Uber and Lyft were penalized. Ultimately, the consumer was penalized. The traveler was penalized. Taxis benefited. What does this go to show? It just goes to show the strength and power and value that companies like Uber and Lyft provide to travelers, how dependent they've become on the services, and still how government entities continue to underestimate them or poo-poo them or, prioritize other people's interests, namely taxis.
In this case, it's local old school monopolies versus modern monopolies, basically. Which
exactly.
Is interesting to see how that plays out.
So they've apologized and said, wow, we really messed this up. Okay. So anyway, good luck flying into LAX. That's why this friend of mine bikes there, but that's kind of difficult if you have luggage. This was interesting. MGM has now struck a deal with Yahoo, and Yahoo has pretty popular fantasy apps, right? For fantasy football, and I guess fantasy basketball is the thing.
And baseball.
Yeah. The kind of fantasy football in and of itself is so much work. I don't understand how you could also manage fantasy basketball.
There's also hockey that I know Yahoo does.
It's so many games.
All the major sports, Yahoo has a big fantasy sports presence, and they have for a long time.
So we've covered that sports betting has essentially been legalized because it's, I guess, a game of skill.
Well, fantasy sports betting.
Fantasy sports betting, yes. It's a skill game. And which is hilarious. But anyway, so now they have this tie-up. Yahoo and MGM. I think that's a pretty good move on Yahoo's part and MGM's part. It's still linear though, and we've spoken in the past that you could continue to see, say, I don't know if ESPN would do this because it's a Disney property and they probably don't condone betting, but you could continue to see the other, fantasy sites partner up with, say, a betting provider now that this has become legalized. But the winner-take-all dynamic in betting is the peer-to-peer dynamic, which is still newer. It's still much more nascent, but the economics are just there. the value is there from a product selection and an economic standpoint down to the individual bettees. So it'll be interesting who capitalizes on that first.
Interesting area where I would hope to see this start to pop up is in esports, where the gambling market is a little less established and someone might try out some new stuff. There's a bunch of startups trying to tackle this. I know for sure, but it would be interesting to see some of these bigger companies move into esports with more of this kind of peer-to-peer model for gambling, as I think that's an area that you could have some innovation happening because it's a little less established than the big betting houses that you have for traditional sports.
Oh, yeah, that's
something to watch.
That would be interesting. Yeah. Who would you put your money on? Ninja? Or who's the guy who just moved to Shroud? Yeah. Be interesting. New Call of Duty is out, by the way. So Fiat Chrysler and PSA Pugo merged to create a $50 billion automaker. This is roughly on size now with Ford, GM, and I think Tesla. Tesla's right around. Yeah. Right around. Tesla had a big beat.
In terms of market cap, in terms of market share,
yes.
Tesla's still well behind, but yeah.
That's true. I mean, you're just continuing to see consolidation. These automakers have not been able to figure out how to actually deliver digital business models.
Right.
Of any significance.
They've been struggling with that. They can see the value is shifting more toward software and these sort of digital components rather than just the hardware and the vehicle in their traditional model. And in that world, you don't want to be one of the kind of in-between small players, which both of these were relatively kind of mid-sized to small automakers on the scale of the industry. So it makes sense if you're caught in that kind of trap and see the change that's coming, you would want to combine and be able to be one of the more scale players.
What's interesting is that Pugo is the number 2 automaker in Europe. And Fiat Chrysler is obviously very strong in the US. Yeah. Fiat Chrysler also owns things like Ferrari, and some luxury brands. Yeah, there's been some stumbles in the industry, but you see Ford and Volkswagen and their alliance where they're partnering up now on autonomous driving technology. I think electric vehicle technology as well.
Yep.
That was the impetus, or at least that's what the opinion pieces are on this deal, that now they can combine that investment. Now, the FCA is owned by one family. What family is that? It's the Elkin family. The Elkin family owns a few other things, like CNH Industrial, which is basically a big competitor to Caterpillar. They own a number of other businesses in that holding company as well. But basically, you're seeing the car industry is basically controlled by like 5 families, and for the Fords, the Toyotas, now the Elkins, GM, not so much.
Yeah.
Nissan, Renault, I don't think so. And Volkswagen, no. BMW, yes. And I think Mercedes, no. So what is that? Like 65% of the major car companies are controlled by a family.
Right.
Which is very
heavily
interesting.
Controlled, if not entirely.
Yes. Yeah, like Ford, the family, I think has less than 5% actual say ownership in the company, but from a voting perspective,
yes,
they have all the votes.
Is what matters when it controls. Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting. And see if what these families need to do is understand that they're all in the same boat. And that boat is taking on a lot of water, which they're understanding because they're merging together. But they need to all now collectively partner, or at least have at least a third or half of these players merge. They don't need to merge the company, but they need to merge their digital efforts to get enough critical mass to actually have the ability to kind of get some network effects on the supply side, build a developer ecosystem as we've spoken about.
Right. And the real threat here is a Google or a company like that, maybe an Amazon coming in and what Google is doing with Android Automotive. They got GM to join recently. I think also Volvo and one or two others of the kind of mid-size autos. And if they get enough market share, then the other auto companies are in trouble. And as you said, the only way they can really respond is they got to work together, having 12% market share here, 8% market share there, which a lot of these, even the biggest auto companies, if you look in their kind of major markets, not going to be enough to compete with a Google or someone like that on a development platform for the vehicle.
Correct. Okay, so let's go to Amazon, our friend. Amazon is making 2-hour grocery delivery free for all Prime members. This is a very big deal. A very, very big deal.
Yeah.
Historically, so if you wanted to order groceries basically from Amazon, it was called Amazon Fresh. It still is Amazon Fresh. But the point is, it wasn't included in Prime. So, you pay $120 a year, you get free 2-day delivery. Not included. You had a separate membership fee or a separate delivery fee associated with that order. Now that's going away. It's going away in stages. They are kind of prototyping this out with a select audience of people initially. But what they've been able to do, if you just think about this from an infrastructure standpoint, because where are these orders coming from? So if I'm ordering these fresh goods, they might be coming from a Whole Foods, for example. And so just the delivery and fulfillment mechanism of getting fresh goods from a grocery store to your home is very different than it coming from an Amazon fulfillment center where you have non-perishable goods that are now being sorted. And those products could be coming from a variety of different places. And Amazon's fulfillment system is set up in a very centralized way. And they've obviously figured out how to deliver to you not just 2-day shipping, but now 1-day shipping on a huge chunk of those non-perishable items. So now how do you blend this together and do it in an economical or at least somewhat economical sense? Obviously, this is still costing them. This is still new. They haven't rolled this out everywhere.
Yeah. What this says to me is that Amazon feels confident enough that more kind of autonomous driving technology or drone type delivery is coming soon enough that they want to build the expectation and the user behavior. And then the unit economics are going to change over time. There's no way they're making money doing this over the next 1 to 2 years if they're offering this, in select cities and then maybe eventually nationwide. I'm sure it might get adjusted by the time it gets that far. But this isn't meant to be a moneymaker in the short term. I think this is meant to capture market share in grocery, which is a huge play for Amazon, and build the user behavior to expect this in a way that's going to be hard for their Amazon's rivals to match. And then eventually the technology and the unit economics are going to catch up to that, or at least that's what I would expect the play is here.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, let's also put this in context. 2 other data points. Walmart in the past, 2 months, launched their similar Amazon Prime competitive program, but around grocery, focused on grocery. So you pay an annual membership fee. You're now going to get free grocery delivery into your home.
Yep. Still a pilot program similar to this.
Still a pilot program.
Happening.
Grocery is, I think, 40% of Walmart US's revenue. So it's massive. Grocery is clearly massive for Walmart.
They're the biggest grocery store in the US.
Uh-huh.
By a long shot.
And so obviously Amazon was probably feeling a little bit of heat there. I know that they'd been, this program that they've been working on with Amazon Fresh is something they've been working on for years, by the way.
And it's gone through a few iterations.
Yes. How do they perfect delivery of fresh goods, right? They've been working on this for a very long time. It's only, as you said, Nick, gotten to a point of maturity. It's not fully there. Clearly it's still pilot, but it's gotten to enough of a point that they now want to, do the PR dance and announce it and make this more official. I think the other thing is, if you look at their quarterly earnings that they came out with, Amazon is valued like a growth stock. Here's their 5-day price. And basically nothing bad has happened to their stock. If we rewind the clock a few days, Amazon missed on earnings. So they lost. I mean, they
didn't make as much profit as they were expecting.
They didn't make as much profit, but Amazon's valued as a growth company. AWS was slowing in growth, but clearly what Amazon's saying is we're investing in growth, and I don't care as much about the earnings.
Right. They're investing in 1-day shipping. They were very upfront about that. That cost us money, and that's why our earnings came in lower. But it was good for growth. Yep. And so we're investing in Revenue
that.
grew.
And this is the same kind of mentality. Oh, and by the way, Wall Street doesn't care about our earnings that much either, because we had a pretty decent sized miss on earnings. and our stock is pretty much fine.
If I'm in Amazon shoes with the last few quarters or last year or so has shown as if I'm Amazon, I can make a profit if I want to. And I've shown you and proved that to you. So now you're going to give me a little bit of leeway to go do more growth stuff. And I'm sure, Jeff and the team there has seen we're going to have to make these big investments in order to continue to scale this in grocery, and wanted to get a little leeway with investors by proving, hey, we can take some profits. And, as that, because they've done a lot of focus on profit taking initiatives over the last couple of years. You've seen a lot of moves to move costs off the balance sheet, monetize third party sellers more. And now they're shifting back more into growth mode and say, hey, we proved we can make money. Now we got to go get to the next step, which is, I think, from their point of view, becoming a huge player in grocery and B2B and other areas like that.
So, I'd say this is a win for Amazon, and they're making good progress here. So, let's go to Grubhub. There is a lot of material on this Grubhub situation. If you do have the time to read through basically what Grubhub did is they released a memo to shareholders in advance of their earnings call. So they released it the evening before. And the reason they did this is because there's a very strategic shift in how the company is going to move forward. You can see here that basically the tank has stocked. I mean, the
stock has tanked.
The stock has tanked. It was about $60 a share. Now it's about $34 a share.
So why was that? What was the big news?
So it's a very good read, and I do want to commend Matt Maloney, the CEO and co-founder, in terms of how they're taking this on. We've talked a lot on the show about Uber Eats, about DoorDash,
their competition
in food delivery, and Grubhub is in Platt. They've been a dominant food delivery platform for a long time. A couple points of context before we dig into this. Grubhub's historical traditional business model has been two-sided, not three-sided. We've spoken about how Uber Eats is three-sided, where you have the customer, you have the restaurant, and then you have the delivery driver, basically, or
originally Grubhub
person.
Didn't have the delivery people. It was just restaurants who had their own delivery people connecting with customers. Now they've started to add basically the delivery driver, third side of the network, as a service to restaurants who don't want to have their own delivery staff, which is how Uber Eats operates, which is how DoorDash operates. So their newer competition is doing this, and they had to respond.
Exactly. Now, one of the value props we talk about for platforms is that you have the widest product catalog selection, right? We're going to get to that on the next topic in terms of linear e-commerce SKUs. But right, you have the widest product catalog, especially for any kind of product or service marketplace, like a food delivery platform. You want to have all the restaurants. I want to have all the availability that's out there. And now you're delivering me convenience and all these kinds of things, right? In-home delivery. So Grubhub was slower to make a three-sided marketplace and bring delivery in-house. In the past, they would say, hey, you're the restaurant, you figure out delivery and you figure out how to get the food to the customer, but we're bringing you the customer, right? They have partner restaurants. And so basically the partners are basically paying Grubhub a fee, but the price that the customer sees for the food should be, maybe not always, but should be the same price that they see as if they were to go to the restaurant directly and order the food, right? So what does that mean? That means that the customer is not affected, but that Grubhub is being paid by, basically a take rate by the restaurant, and the restaurant's figuring out fulfillment on their own. Okay, interesting. All of that comes to the point where Grubhub has a smaller product catalog than these aggressor delivery platforms like an Uber Eats. They don't reference Uber Eats, but they basically call out Uber Eats multiple times.
That's because if I'm a restaurant that doesn't have my own delivery service or my own delivery people, in the past I couldn't list on Grubhub, but now these basically Uber Eats said doesn't matter what you have. If you're McDonald's even, who doesn't have their own delivery service or hadn't for a very long time. Whatever it is, we'll take you on if we think your food's a good fit and we want to sell you to our customers. And they'll handle the delivery because obviously if I'm Uber, I have all the drivers already.
Yeah. So basically what you're seeing is, and what they describe in this memo is massive new entrant spending to acquire growth at all costs and do it in an unprofitable way. Grubhub is profitable. And so Grubhub has continued to try to grow, and they have had double-digit growth. But what they're saying is that we need to change our strategy and address this. And so there's a number of key points in here, but I really want to drill in on this one. So I'll just read this out. We know from experience the single biggest determinant of diners' usage on marketplaces is whether it has the restaurants that the diner wants. Makes sense. Historically, we have chosen to only list partnered restaurants on Grubhub. We still firmly believe this is the right way to build the marketplace and is the only way to drive long-term value for all the participants. Okay, here's the money or the lighting money on fire part. But it also takes longer to build the network this way. Partnering takes a lot of work. Others, Uber Eats and delivery, DoorDash and all these places. Others have chosen to list non-partnered restaurants on their marketplaces and have generated strong diner and order growth despite high diner pricing and challenging economics. Right now, our existing and new potential diners find more restaurants on other platforms. We need to eliminate this difference, and speed is paramount. Okay, this means we've got to change course and we've got to do it fast. This is really the crux of it. A few supporting notes on this, which I thought were really interesting. I listened to their quarterly earnings call. It was this week. I think it was Tuesday morning. Yeah, Tuesday morning. And so they spoke a lot about looking at cohorts. And as a refresher for folks that don't know what a cohort, basically what you do is you look at a segment of your audience or your customer base. And so they are divvying up cohorts and saying, let me look at my new diners, right? New customers that I've attracted in. And they have historical data to say, okay, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, a year ago, what was the behavior of new diners that join my platform? And they have some kind of CAC associated with that, cost of customer acquisition. And the key thing for any business is, what is my CAC to LTV ratio? LTV is lifetime value. So what you want to look at is say, okay, I spent X to acquire this customer. Okay. How much did this customer continue to use my product? Did that usage increase or decrease over time? What is each average customer worth to me? And
how long does it take me to make back that acquisition
cost?
How
long does it take me to break even? How long profit? And all of that basically means the ideal thing you want to look for is a 3-to-1 CAC to LTV ratio. Basically, that you can make three times the amount. Your LTV is at least 3 times as high as what it costs for you to acquire that customer.
And typically, you want to look at VC economics. They would look for, you want to make that back in 6 months. So you want to get 1-to-1 within 6 months and ultimately reach a 3-to-1 ratio for that customer.
So
the sooner the better.
So Grubhub looks at this data very closely. And so they're looking at these and they're saying, in August, they said, okay, so this is what's really interesting. It is now October. And in August, they said it really started to change for them. It was the tipping point when they were doing these cohort analyses. And they said, we looked at the new diners that we would get, and they started to, basically what they said is they started to order. They would order with Grubhub, and then they would order with other platforms. And so there was much lower diner loyalty in the sense that they would use Grubhub interchangeably with other places. What really mattered was, could I order from specific restaurants that people wanted to order from? This is a big problem. Grubhub has spoken now that this has also started to seep into their existing customer cohorts. So they're seeing now, not just in the new diner cohort, but now existing analyses, existing customers, that this is starting to creep into that.
I can definitely speak to that personally. Used to traveling a lot, busy, used to order on Grubhub frequently. And then Uber Eats is basically, and DoorDash to a lesser extent, have basically overtaken that. And unless there's a specific place I want and the others don't have it, I don't order as much from Grubhub anymore. And I used to be, a loyal Grubhub customer, and that ability to go elsewhere is just because they have more inventory. That's the short version. That network effect there is stronger.
Exactly. So, what this means is that Grubhub is going to invest heavily in acquiring more salespeople, so that they can try to both get restaurants to be a partner restaurant with them, but now to also go and sign up non-partner restaurants. So what that means is basically if I'm Grubhub, I'm going to make much less money on every order going to a non-partner restaurant. But what they're saying is I need to just retain my customers.
Right. I need the inventory.
I'm getting leakage.
Even if I'm not making money on all of their orders, at least I'll make money on some of them. And if I don't, rather than losing them basically and then not coming back, and then I don't make any money.
And then the next point here talks about diner loyalty, and all these kinds of things, right? But I'll jump down right here, right? So for restaurant inventory, we will rapidly expand our recent pilots of putting non-partnered restaurants on the platform. For reasons we've discussed many times, we believe non-partnered options are the wrong long-term answer for diners, restaurants, and shareholders. It is expensive for everyone, a suboptimal diner experience, and rife with operational challenges. With that said, it is extremely efficient and cheap to add non-partnered inventory to our platform, and it can at least ensure that all of our current and potential new diners have the option to order from any of their favorite restaurants now, even if it's not the best solution.
Right. Basically, they have to go scrape a bunch of menus from websites, and then you can just put it on their platform and say, hey, we'll send you orders.
So by leveraging non-partnered options, we believe we can more than double the number of restaurants on our platform in a year, basically, by the end of 2020.
Pretty big difference.
Which is a massive growth when you think about it. And when you think about their existing been around for, diner presence.
Decade plus, and to say that, hey, we can double our restaurants in a year is a pretty big change.
Exactly. So basically, this means their margins are getting rocked. They're investing heavily in bringing on more headcount. They're now catering and their core transactions. So the money they make per order, which is a huge KPI that they track, gets nuked because now that goes way down on the transactions for non-partner restaurants. But they need growth, or they need to retain these customers. They need to be able to continue to grow, and they need to be able to retain their existing customer base. This is a great example of platform wars. I think this is a great example of when platforms battle, the users win, both consumers and producers. Non-partner restaurants are winning from this too, because now I can get demand from Grubhub and I don't have to pay them fees, or I don't have to pay them the same,
at least in the short term,
level of fees and lock-in. Grubhub goes on to talk about Level Up. They bought Level Up, which is a point of sale platform. And so what's interesting to me is that Caviar was just ripped out from underneath Square, which had a bundled the Square point of sale and Caviar bundling.
Right. They sold it to DoorDash for $400 million, roughly.
I think Square saw that this fight was just gonna continue to heat up.
Yep.
And they could make some money. I think they bought Caviar for about $100 million. So they 4X their investment.
Yep. You've seen some consolidation, I think, in Europe as well, where you have similar kind of battles going on. I wouldn't be surprised to see even more consolidation continuing to happen in the US.
Now, the key is to get this partner inventory. So outside of just having outsized demand, and that is the mechanism that you use to get restaurants to partner up with you and basically pay you more fees, right? How else do you do that? And I think that's where this Level Up thing gets kind of interesting. Yep. I wouldn't be surprised. It really depends on how aggressive Dara at Uber wants to be, or potentially DoorDash as well. This would be interesting between, is Dara really feeling the heat from investors? How much is he feeling heat from investors? How aggressive does he want to be?
To turn a profit.
Because if I was Dara, or if I'm DoorDash, this point of sale thing I think is very interesting to me. Would I go buy Toast, for example?
Another big point of sale startup.
Big point of sale startup. I think it's a unicorn. I think they've probably raised like $400 or $500 million. But there's a few of these big up and coming point of sale systems that have heavy penetration with who? Restaurants. And what are these sticky linear services that you can layer into your solution to try to just further embed yourself with the supply.
Makes it harder to leave the platform, makes it harder to switch if, I'm going to lose all this other stuff too. And maybe I pay for some of it, but it all works together and makes the experience or difficulties of running a restaurant, of which there are myriad, much easier if it all kind of works together in one place. So there's definitely some synergies there.
So what's one takeaway from this? Supply really is king.
Yep.
And Nick's mic cut out when we were talking about this. We were talking about our friend. He is a friend. I respect him a lot for a lot of what he writes about. But one point that he got wrong maybe a couple weeks ago.
Ben Thompson.
Yeah. What was his? Was he talking about Netflix?
He was talking about, I think in the context, maybe it was Uber or something like that, and said supply doesn't matter. It's all about aggregating demand, basically.
It was Uber. Or he's talking about just aggregating demand and supply doesn't matter.
Something like that.
Yeah. It was about the driver stuff. Well, here is a great scenario, and we were talking. You couldn't hear Nick's side of it though, but we were basically talking about how supply is absolutely paramount for platforms. Netflix, which he recognized as an aggregator, we do not recognize as a platform. We think Netflix is going to have a hard time because it doesn't have a supply side network effect. Because
it's linear, it owns and licenses and creates all its own content. There's no third party creator that it's connecting with customers.
It's not as defensible. It doesn't have a moat. It doesn't have a network effect. It doesn't have a winner take all.
Right. Its moat is basically how much it's going to spend on content this year and next year.
Which, as we are seeing, AT&T just got for $500 million. South Park, by the way.
Yep.
But yeah, how much money, how much dry powder do you have? How much you're going to spend? This is how do you capture it, right? So I can spend money, but how do I get these restaurants? And so these are basically hacks. These non-partner restaurants are basically a hack to get access to supply. But now, how do I get those restaurants to work more closely with me? And that is yes, you can spend money, but now how can you make that a sticky value prop where they are now working with you and a producer, a more closely aligned producer on the platform? So this will be very interesting to see how this pans out. Grubhub got a huge haircut. I don't know if the haircut was this justified. They did not provide 2020 guidance, which I think really freaked out their investors, rightly so. But basically, Grubhub is going to war.
Right. And our unit economics are going to suck basically on at least half of our orders if we're adding 50, another doubling our number of restaurants. Unit economics will be terrible. Well, we have to do this to grow because if we don't have the supply, going back to the conversation we had where the mic cut out on Ben Thompson's article, if you don't have the supply, you lose that network effect. The only time supply doesn't matter if you basically have a monopoly and there's no effective competition. And then it's really about I have the demand. Where else are you going to go? But when you have these platforms competing against each other, where they usually compete is on the supply side, at least as much as on the demand side. And you're seeing that here with Grubhub, where they've lost out because they've gotten left behind on the supply side in a big way.
Yeah. It's interesting. There's going to be more consolidation because you have DoorDash, which bought Caviar, right?
Yes.
You have Postmates, which is trying to go IPO.
Or get acquired or something to that effect.
Now you have Grubhub and you have Uber Eats.
Right.
There's definitely not room for four. So I think if Grubhub can show that they can fight back and put a dent, it gives them much more leverage to look at then merging or acquiring
a Postmates or something like
Postmates.
That.
Postmates is much smaller than a DoorDash.
Yeah.
I think DoorDash probably has a higher valuation than Grubhub.
Yes.
Interestingly enough. So, so Grubhub is now coming from behind, essentially, at least on the two major players.
Right.
We've already spoken about how I think, Uber Eats not dwarfs, but definitely has more GMV than DoorDash and Grubhub in food delivery. So Uber Eats is, again, we are seeing platform conglomerate versus platform specific businesses. And we've said before in the past, we're bullish on Uber overall long term. Uber's earnings come out on Monday. And I think we are seeing those advantages really play into, and Grubhub mentions it in this letter, that a national competitor with a national fulfillment capability came into the space and basically rocked our world.
Who could that be?
Exactly. So, okay. Where did this article? Okay. Grainger. This is one of the most well-known B2B distributors, and what they're doing to stand up to an Amazon. And they've invested a lot in e-commerce. We've spoken about this in B2B distribution now, folks. And basically in this article, the one thing I'll just point out here is that they talk about expanding the number of SKUs. So we're just on the topic of SKUs with Grubhub. Now we're going back to this. So they said in the third quarter, we added about 350,000 SKUs, which brings us to 800,000 SKUs. This is another Wolf of Wall Street reference. Those are rookie numbers. You got to pump those numbers up. This is industrial supplies, folks. This is like markers and
safety supplies,
supplies,
goggles,
and like paper supplies and goggles.
Right.
I mean, there is some equipment. There are certainly some larger purchases and some more.
Right. MRO does have some actual more kind of heavy industrial stuff to it, but This is a ton of pack and ship stuff. Basic supplies basically that a lot of their manufacturing customers and a lot of others use, and it's not a lot of SKUs that they're touting, and I think that our point of view obviously is marketplace would get a lot quicker.
Right. So their goal is to add 10 million items over the next 3 to 5 years. I mean, that's kind of a long time. I guarantee Amazon Business has millions of SKUs right now in just industrial supplies.
Yeah.
And this needs to be much faster. And I think our point here is that if you were to embrace a marketplace with third-party sellers, you would get there much faster.
Right. You
like
could
an
talk
order
about
of
getting
magnitude faster.
You could talk about getting 10 million SKUs in 12 to 18 months.
Yeah, I would say in 2 years, get 10 million SKUs, right? Which is more than 10xing the SKUs that you have in 2 years.
Yeah.
And that should be the goal. What is it? The big, hairy, audacious goal? That should be the goal. But I don't know. We'll see. Etsy. Okay. Etsy's getting rocked. I don't really know. It's not too clear why. They actually hit their earnings expectations. They actually hit the earnings per share right on the head. They revised some of the guidance, but they actually didn't revise their growth guidance down. So again, you would think if Etsy stock is down by over 13% right now, and they didn't necessarily have a bad earnings release. So it's kind of curious. It looks like they're going to have around $5 billion for full year GMV. They call it gross merchandise sales. So they don't really call it GMV, but this is the same thing as GMV. They had good growth, and they have introduced things like shipping on orders of $35 or more. You would expect that to hurt their earnings. I actually think it hurt their earnings less than I thought it was going to hurt their earnings. As we've seen with, say, Amazon rolling out next day shipping, right? So you kind of see that really hurt the bottom line. It actually didn't hurt it as much as I think it could have. They did reduce a little bit of their earnings guidance forward looking, but again, these companies don't get destroyed. You don't lose 13-15% of your stock price over slightly decreasing your earnings guidance in the future. It's on growth. And they had strong growth. I think, the theory here is that, or I guess the short sellers are trying to unload a lot on Etsy. And I think what Etsy is saying is that they need to invest, or they need to invest in shipping and a lot of these things to stay competitive. But they're really, maybe Wall Street wants to see companies be, more profitable or something sooner with the whole WeWork debacle and all these kinds of things. But I think this is an unwarranted level of sell-off on Etsy, kind of given their guidance, given their priorities, their trajectory. I actually am much more bullish than clearly what the stock market is doing to their stock price right now. So maybe that's an opportunity. Maybe not. But I actually think they've done a pretty good job so far. So on the other hand, LendingTree is way up. Etsy is like 15% down. LendingTree is 13% up. And they revised their earnings and their guidance up on both growth and profit and EBITDA. I think they're just attributing this to just strong performance, strong demand, good execution, and they have a very good outlook. So I think that's very interesting. Maybe you think the Fed cutting interest rates is a boon for them? You think that's helping them? I'm
sure a healthy economy definitely helps them. I think the interesting thing that I see here is, a lot of companies are hesitant looking at lending marketplace and that kind of stuff because they're worried about the future economic performance that we're going to see over the next couple of years with kind of recession potentially looming on the horizon. A lot of people are worried. To see LendingTree basically buck that trend and say, hey, we're a lending marketplace, we're still going strong, and our guidance is going to get even better, is an interesting proof point that this model is still working and working pretty well.
Yeah, it's interesting. So, and what just happened is Pinterest just released earnings. Pinterest is also way down, 18% down right now. And basically they missed on revenue. And but they still had strong growth. They are losing money. But I think this one is definitely one of those ones that is more, we are losing money vulnerable. I think this is probably more of a symptom of just how investors are feeling right now about investing in companies that aren't profitable.
Right. And I think content, we've seen this with Snap. We've seen this with a number of the Chinese content platforms. If you're building an advertising business, basically a content platform or a platform that only monetizes on advertising, that's a much weaker monetization scheme than being able to take some kind of a take rate or direct cut of the value being exchanged. And it's much harder to get to profitability. Even Facebook took a number of years. Google took a number of years to get there. So I think a lot of these content platforms struggle for a long time. We've seen Twitter deal with this too. And Pinterest is still very early on, and I expect they've still got some more speed bumps to go through before they get close to profitability, if they do.
Yeah, the interesting thing so Pinterest is doing full year revenue. They estimate at 1.1 to 1.115, which is basically 1 billion 100 million to 1 billion 115 billion.
50.
1 billion 115 million.
Got it.
Jeez. So analysts were expecting sales of 1 billion 120 million. So it's like, we revised it down by $5 to $10 million. But they they narrowed the guidance on their loss, which was previously a range of 25 to 50 million loss for that same period of time, to 10 to 30 million loss. So they shrunk the loss more than they shrunk the revenue. But again, A, Wall Street wants to see growth. B, Wall Street is very nervous about these companies that don't make money. That said, this amount of money, it's basically nothing. What is this, like 0.1% of revenue?
It's not bad. They're getting close.
I really don't, or no, it's 1 to 3% of revenue, a $10 to $30 million loss on roughly $1 billion in revenue. It's really not that bad. This also seems like an overreaction to me. Pinterest is up net 30% since they IPO'd prior to the 18% drop. So the stock is still probably up around 10 to 12% since they IPO'd as a result of this. But I don't know. These Pinterest and Etsy seem like pretty drastic slides for, I think, earnings announcements that were not as drastic as the reaction from Wall Street is. So take that for what you think it's worth. But thank you for joining us today on Winner Take All. We will talk to you tomorrow. We have a guest joining us tomorrow morning, and so we will talk to you then about a new initiative from I think Uber and Lyft have partnered up on this, as well as one other company, which I'm forgetting right now, to counteract California's law about classifying their 1099 workers as W-2 employees. So we will dig into that tomorrow morning. Thanks for joining us.